everyone. Thanks for joining us. This session is all about exploring teaching methodologies in human-centered design. So in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. This webinar is being recorded, so it will be sent out next week to all those who have registered. There is a Q&A at the top of the screen next to the chat as well. So you can use that, but we will kind of get to the Q&A at the end of the session. So you can put all your questions there. And if we run out of time, we'll be in touch with an answer. And then also you'll receive your chosen resource on publication. If you have any questions, you can contact us at our email, which is os.secondary@cengage.com for any post-event questions. Now move on and pass it on to our presenters.
Thanks, Jessica. Just a quick outline of what we're hoping to cover today. Very keen to hear from you as well. So we plan to talk a little bit about the Nelson MindTap content and how to access it, and what some of the things you might do with it. Mike's going to then talk about an example of an NMT resource and a class activity. We've tried to develop quite a few activities to make it easier to use the content in class without very much prep. So he's going to give you an example of that. I'll talk a little bit about some of the content that we've written for the Unit 3 stakeholder and stakeholder-centered design. Oh, hang on, I keep saying user-centered design because that's what I use at uni. But yeah, the Unit 3 content, and we'll focus on stakeholder engagement. And then we've tried to leave plenty of time at the end for a bit of a Q&A to respond to your questions. So you can post Q&As in the using the Teams facility, and we'll see those during the presentation. We've also set up a Mentimeter webpage where you can either click on the link here, click on the link in the chat, or scan the QR code on the screen with your phone. Scan it with your phone. You could add words as we go if you wish. And we'll look at the word cloud that comes out of that when we get to the Q&A and decide what's the most pressing content for you to talk about. So I hope that makes sense to you. Anything you want to add, Mike, about what's ahead of us?
No, just welcome to everyone. Looking forward to sharing what we can. I'm never sure I prefer the term expert because I don't see myself that way, but I'm certainly very happy to share findings and what we've been doing, in particular using some of the NMT resources in the classroom. Thanks, Andrew.
Fantastic. Okay, Mike, do you want to talk about, or is this still me? Nelson MindTap stuff. Okay, I'll talk about this and then we'll go back and forth a bit. I'm keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A, so see how we go. Okay, so for book one, as you know, we've got two textbooks. Book one was published at the end of last year, and book two will be coming out towards the end of this year. And for each book, we wanted to try and make it as easy for you to teach the design syllabus. And we thought, let's develop some slide decks and some Word files and some PDFs that you can use, print them out, circulate them in the class, get students to run activities with them, or download the slide decks and put them on the screen in your class and hopefully be up and running without too much extra preparation. So that's the idea behind the NMT resources. Anything you want to add there, Mike?
No, I mean, it's just that they are easy to use, and I can say that from a point of I've used them and often go to them on a lazy teaching day. If I've got nothing prepared, I can open one and it's good to go, which is great. And I think one of the issues a lot of teachers have told us is the access to the NMT resources and downloading them all and having them in an easy grab space is one of the issues that they've found difficult, which is a shame because it's such a good resource. So I think that's what we were going to look at first, and then I was going to talk about one of those activities.
Okay. Oh, and I think we've got a slide on accessing the resources just about coming up, but there's some great stuff, including like teaching plans that Mike's developed to sort of guide you. And these are always, of course, suggestions, and you obviously edit them and make them your own. But here's Caroline. She's going to talk a little bit about accessing the files.
Hi everyone, I'm Caroline Williams. I'm the publisher. I'm lucky enough to work with Mike and Andrew for the last couple of years now on this project. We did get some feedback about finding these amazing PowerPoints and keynotes. So they've been supplied in both platforms for you for ease of use. At the moment, the easiest way for those of you who have Year 11 Nelson Mindtap and are keen to, after this, to get stuck into them, it's just a matter of looking at your teacher resources, going to the Getting Started section tab, and then identifying the design activities, and then you'll see them all. So you don't necessarily need to, if you search for PowerPoint, it won't come up at the moment. We have heard feedback that makes it a bit tricky. You're looking just for PowerPoints and keynotes, you know they're there. So we are actually going to be updating the metadata behind this. So as of next year with the Year 11, you'll be able to just go hunting for the PowerPoint or keynote, and they'll all be available. And the Year 12, when it's published in November, also has got some amazingly rich resources, which Mike and Andrew are going to talk you through. That will already have that searchability there. So we are just kind of trying to respond as best we can to make things as easy and practical as possible. So yeah, hopefully that if you've got any more questions, by all means, put them in the chat. I'm happy to, in the side, to answer any questions. If you're having trouble accessing NMT, I can put you onto the right people. But enough of me. Hopefully that covers everything. But as I said, just sing out if that's not clear. Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Caroline. Okay, Mike's going to talk about the empathy map example, one of the examples slides.
Okay, I think I have the PowerPoint now. So I'll start by talking about kind of why I thought today I would share an empathy map. It's an activity that you see in a lot of the what are now called the design challenges, used to be called the design exams, but in the last 5 or so of them, we saw empathy maps used three times. We've seen the example one being released by QCA, that another empathy map is used for the human-centered design sample, which is Rick's bag, and you design for Rick's bag, and again it gives an empathy map, which is really just a data collection point. It's got quantitative, it's got qualitative data, and trying to get students to use them and create them themselves is a really great project resource. It's one that we don't have a huge amount of guidance on how to use one, so I thought I would really approach Andrew and kind of ask him for all his support and about how we go about it. When I teach it with students, we talk about it being more in the explore phase. I suppose you could use it later on. You could use it in the development or refinement stage, but typically it's in this explore phase in our first diamond. And we're looking to more than just in a human-centered way. We're looking to get more than simply what people do and don't want, but more tap into that empathy side of things and how they are feeling towards things and how they are emotionally tied towards things, and that emotional durability that we do talk about in the book as well. And there's some other texts that really expand on that one. What you need. So we're now kind of going into activities. So this really is just, it's given to you. If you wanted to run through with students at this speed, I probably will go a little bit faster. And it talks about the typical rules of empathy maps, and it's about really listening in to your group or your person or your stakeholder, rather than just kind of firing significantly prompted questions towards them. It's trying to let them guide their story of what they want to bring together, and our role is really just to gather that and draw it as one. throughout this activity, and I'm kind of running through quite quickly, I might talk to students about the different terminologies and what we're trying to produce as an outcome. Maybe it's a 5-minute task, maybe it's a 10-minute task, and it can be. I can certainly use up an hour and a half, and have done before. We've got a worksheet with this one. Students tend to like it because it's got a series of additional prompts to help them towards what they're trying to collect going forward. Normally at this stage, if I was delivering it in a class, certainly for the first time, and this might happen in Unit 1 and 2 for a Year 11 group rather than waiting for Unit 3, I'll talk to them about something really simple and I'll model it in front of them. So I might talk to them about my day experience at the supermarket, which can go down lots of different avenues, and we can talk about how I felt at the supermarket and how dirty it was, perhaps, and how grumpy the people behind the staff were. And I can go into lots and lots of detail, but I'm trying to model that by putting it up on the board and talking to them about the experience. It's a one-sided event because I'm not doing it through Q&A, but I'm just trying to experience that one with them. My next move would normally be trying to get students to pair up, maybe in groups of 3 as well. And I often lead in when you're doing first time empathy map, let's look at a school event, because all kids have been to a school event. So I might say, let's look at the last assembly you went to, or can you think of a sporting event or a college fair or a fete or something along those lines, and get them to talk again, going through some of the titles. So it's, the typical ones we see are says, thinks, does, and feels. And we have seen quite often, certainly on the QCE example, that we see attitudes, motivations, experience, and expectations. That's kind of forward thinking in empathy map terms. What we say, think, does, and feels is almost, it's in the moment, as opposed to the alternative, and that's is what people are their attitudes towards motivation and experience is kind of it's a future point, and that's just a point in the language. But we then often see students kind of engaging with that really for some kids it's quite simple terms, kind of, oh, what did you see, what did you think, but what did do, oh well, someone came into the assembly and then they spoke, what did I feel? Well, I felt the floor was hard, rather than talking about emotions and how they felt during an assembly, for example. So we try and going around the room and trying to get them to unpack bits and pieces there. I'll just have a look at just going through the activity. We've got a range. Oh, we're still got yeah. We've got some other templates available to them, I believe. Is that the end, Andrew? Is that the end of our slide section for the activity?
Yeah, there are. Yeah, I think so. For this particular one.
Yeah, so I think that covers a whole range, and probably need to go through it a little bit slower to get that fuller understanding. But then my next move is often to try and put it into project terms. So if we're running a project at the time, or we might put a single standalone one, it's trying to get students to move away from events and experiences, perhaps, and talk about an environment. So we might go on a short trip around the college and go to the college library. And talk about the experience of just walking in and out of a college library, and then beyond that start talking about whatever's relevant to their project going forward. I guess this is one of many, and I think the NMT resources give us a range of options to move forward in different directions, but what's fantastic about it is they're adaptable. As sometimes if you feel that they're going on a bit too long, of course we can skip a slide, but we can go in and edit them, and you've got that full opportunity to go and edit and remove and change, even down to the styling if you're not a big fan of the blue and white, and take it in your own direction. Andrew, was there anything you wanted to add? I think I talked too much there.
Oh no, this is a great overview, Mike. I suppose one thing I'd add is that the activities are discussed in the books. So the slides are to be used in conjunction with the books as well. So you don't have to rely just what's in the slides. The books discuss when to run the activities and all the kind of what you need. what the rules are, all that kind of stuff's in the books as well. So the idea was your students can read this stuff in the books. They might do some of these activities on their own at home because some of them can be done solo. But if you want to run them in class, you can put the slide deck on the screen and kind of run it through with a whole group of people if that's how you want to go.
Yeah. There are many more. You'll find a lot more of the NMT resources are very available in book 1. We do have some exam focused resources in book 2 that are worth exploring as well. Probably the ones I haven't tested fully yet because we haven't started preparing for the 2026 exam.
We've talked about some of that stuff, I think, Mike. Do you want me to take back control?
Please do, Andrew. I think we're going to look at stakeholder engagement within Unit 3, trying to get students to connect with stakeholders and reaching out and ways that they can do that.
Oh, that's good. I just wanted to say a quick word about the slides, the slides themselves. There's hidden slides, using the PowerPoint thing where you don't have a slide visible. And so typically early in the presentation, or I just wanted to raise your attention, when you look at the slides, don't forget to have a look at what's in the hidden slides, because there's stuff in there that's specifically for you, that's got tips, and sometimes some amplified, some more detailed tips than you see in the book, actually, because the book is written with the understanding that students will reach it as well as teachers. But in the slide decks, we assume that only teachers will see them. And so the hidden slides are just for you. And sometimes they give you a little bit of extra depth that isn't in the books. But yeah, and as Mike said, edit them, make them your own, make the styles fit, your school livery if you want. We are a little bit constrained with some of the images because we need permissions for images that are published on the NNT website. So you might find that there are by adding your own images, you can make them a lot richer and more interesting. Okay, all right. I'll move on to the stakeholder engagement. How are we going for time? Okay, so book 2 deals with human-centered design, and a big part of that is of course, focusing on stakeholders. Unit 1 talks about stakeholders as well, but it talks about the clients, the people who make the things that get designed, and a whole lot of other stakeholders. Whereas Unit 3 is sort of taking the focus down to the actual people, the kind of like the end users, as we might say in my field. That's a really important part. It's really emphasized in the whole syllabus that students must speak to real people, and we're very aware that for a high school student going out and talking to people they might not know very well can be quite kind of scary, and some people tend to put off things they're a bit worried about. One of the things we always recommend is that it's really helpful to talk to the stakeholders, to find stakeholders first, and then to engage with them as early as possible in the process. So that's something you really want to be doing in the first couple of weeks of a project. If you're running a design project that students are designing to suit the needs of stakeholders, you really want to try and do that. Find people in the first couple of weeks, and they don't want to be finding people in the last couple of weeks. Then they can't usefully use that information that they discover at that stage. That can be pretty confronting for students. We recommend a couple of different methods for engaging with stakeholders. And probably one of an important question that comes up is how many should you engage with? And the first assessment item in Unit 3 is the design challenge worth 20%. And the phrasing says, fill a gap in the market, a stakeholder or a group of people. So that suggests that it's sufficient to have a single person as a stakeholder. One of the issues with putting all your eggs in one basket is that a student can't force a stakeholder to be around for the whole project. And so there is a danger if it's all on one person, that if something happens to them, if they have to go away or they're not able to participate later on, it can put them in a slightly sticky predicament. So if possible, it's great to encourage students to engage with more than one person. Even though, for example, in the IA2 project, which is 30%, it does say a stakeholder. So I guess it's just important that students are fully aware, how important it is to their work and to their assessment, and how liaising with people outside the school, conceivably, can be a tricky thing to do. Anything you'd like to add about the practicalities of that, Mike?
Happily, I did try and get students to target a younger group, and I'd actually put an age range on, and I found when students were able to connect with primary school students, that was really convenient and easy for them because the kids were there on their own hand and they're on the same campus. But I did also find that when we talk to primary kids that are under the age of 7 or 8, that they're very want focused. They're very, very want focused, not so much need focused, very much I want in relation to whatever they wanted to discuss and share. So sometimes to get more of an in-depth discussion from them required a lot of prompting from our students, and some of our students weren't quite mature enough to provide that. So they ran on this kind of really basic data and tried to respond to it. So my encouragement there, if you're writing your projects, is to make sure that we just move maybe upwards of 10 years old. I think that would be a better demographic area to target. And of course, you can't stay in your student's own age group as well. So, moving beyond that and moving upwards of. In fact, that's one of the very few things that you seem to be able to control on the projects is the demographic that you might be targeting going forward. And just getting kids to reconnect and having that backup stakeholder is really worthwhile. To suggest to them, if you can't contact one person, is there someone else that can also continue to give a similar opinion? Are they in the same demographic? Have you got that ability to touch base with them? Could you touch base with them electronically if they're away for a period of time? Is there an email contact? And trying to get all forms of communications across, because we're going to see, I think this later on, that we're expecting students to make contact certainly at the beginning, certainly before the brief, and then a series of points in that development phase where we create a series of ideas and then try and get more and more direction. But certainly the quicker you get that first point of contact, the quicker you get an empathy map or some sort of an interview collection, and there's no right and wrong on the best ways to collect that data, then the quicker the students get direction on what to look at next. And the folios, or the design folios, they really start to tell the story of where they're going, and that's I think the spirit of the new design syllabus is try and tell the story, not using every single page to get full marks and as many words as you can squeeze on. Tell the story of where you're going to and why. So lots and lots of summaries, and even an empathy map has pains and gains at the end, and that's that summary of telling us of what we've learned from having a conversation with someone and letting them tell their story.
Yeah, good points, Mike. These are some of the engagement methods we've got in book 2. So the ones that are most relevant are probably the ones that most students will be comfortable with is what we call interviews, which is, in other words, going out and talking to stakeholders, talking to users, to people who you're designing for. We've also included guidelines for more elaborate methods, such as questionnaires and surveys, and even focus groups. And there's kind of like a sliding scale of complexity and scope for those things. So an interview can be as simple as talking to 1 or 2 people, or 5 people, and just asking them a series of loosely prepared questions. and making notes of their responses. Whereas something like a questionnaire can be a little bit more formal, where you've got a list of questions, perhaps that you either, that you have basically a clipboard thing where you go through and what do you feel about this? What do you think about this? Blah, blah, blah. That means in order to do a questionnaire, you need to have already sussed out some of the stuff about what stakeholders, what their agendas already are. And then the other end of the scale is a questionnaire, or sorry, a survey, where you might be circulating a form using printed and photocopied forms, or a website, which is even easier. And that's where you might be gathering information from 20, 30, 100 people, and looking at their responses tabulated. If that sounds like a tricky things to do, it's probably beyond the scope of a lot of individual student design work. But it might work well if you've got a theme, an overarching theme for the class where everyone's doing a similar kind of thing, and you have a fairly large pool of stakeholders. So the example we include in the book is maybe you set the scope of the project as being redesigning the school tuck shop, and so the stakeholder pool there is pretty large. You've got hundreds and possibly many hundreds of students using the tuck shop. You've got many staff, the people behind the counter, people bringing in the food, people maintaining the equipment, and that might be quite an easy survey to run if you had the forms in that people could use, could fill out when they're waiting to be served, or a QR code they could scan with their phones if they have access to their phones at that time. And so that could result in a lot of information being shared amongst the class, and people being able to interpret it their own ways for their own design responses. So yeah, I guess it's about choosing the methods that seem to suit the circumstances of the project and the student needs. The important thing is that we've tried to make a lot of these activities and provide diversity there. It's important that students don't think, oh my God, I've got to do all of these. That's absolutely not the case. It would totally overload you if you tried to use all of these different tools. You go crazy. And something like a focus group is pretty high level in terms of the skills. It needs a skilled facilitator, for example, and there's probably a few cases when you want to do that. Looking further into later stages of the design process, in the develop phase, things like user testing, where you get people to try out prototypes, and there might be paper prototypes, very simple things, using card sorting techniques to help work out information structures, maybe for a website or an app design. So there are lots of different processes that can take place at different stages. And I guess the common one across all stages is simply talking to people, which we've called interviews, and you can do that at any stage, including talking to people, letting them know at the end of how your design turned out, and either for feedback or just to close the loop and let them know, thank you for helping me in my project, and this is what I came up with. That's a kind of really nice thing to do. And maybe even they get to see you pitch or present your work to the class, or maybe you run it especially for them. So there are
Andrew,
lots of, yeah.
We've got a question here from Nicholas. I really like it. He says, how do you feel about using AI as your stakeholder client? He's used it in activities, built a profile of potential stakeholders. It has worked well. He's telling us, having that conversation and going throughout the activity. So going back and forth with an AI. So building your ChatGPT into and explaining this is the role you need to play, and then using them to go back and forth. I think obviously, if we were talking about a real project, we have to go back to QCE guidelines, and it doesn't suggest that we necessarily can't, but I think it's supposed to be a real person, a real world problem. But using it for small projects that are somewhere in between and trying it out sounds exciting. Your thoughts?
I think that's a really intriguing idea, because depending on how you prompt the AI, for the role they take, they can produce some really interesting results. I would see it as a really good developmental tool, but I'd be cautious about using it for the core of your key projects because well, firstly, my experiences with uni students, getting them to engage with stakeholders can be really difficult. And I've seen students prefer questionnaires and surveys because they don't actually have to see people. They can just send things out. Whereas talking to people requires a little bit more preparation and presentation and confidence. So I'd be a little bit concerned that too much reliance on an online tool or an AI thing might not help students develop that that empathy, that empathy with the person, which is perhaps a key part. Certainly, the syllabus is really keen on empathy. It talks quite a lot about developing empathy and recognizing that there are people behind those needs and wants, and understanding them and relating to them is an important way of motivating you to do a good job for them, as opposed to the abstract concept of serving the needs of a client who wants to have a profitable, product or a profitable building or something like that. So yeah, that empathy thing. I think that the AI, my reaction to the AI thing is really intriguing, but I wouldn't suggest that it be the only way of engaging.
But a nice warm up, I would suggest. If you weren't using it for your actual projects and you were doing something prior as a mini, you get an instant response. You can program it to be, in my case, you could program it to be a grumpy old middle-aged man and that has X, Y, and Z job and 2 kids and doesn't get any sleep. And you could get some perhaps genuine responses. I think it's quite exciting. I think I might take it on. So thank you very much for that, Nicholas. That's great.
Yeah, it's a really intriguing idea. Yeah. I was just thinking of something else that you made me think then. Oh yeah, one of the concerns I have with the syllabus, and this is my academic hat, is that one of the dangers of focusing on singular stakeholders, singular users, is that you end up kind of letting them dictate everything, when more realistically, professional designers are designing for many people at once, and not serving the need of a single person. And so there is a risk if you're focusing on a single person that you end up kind of just doing what they say. Tell me what you want. Okay, I'll give you that type thing. When an important skill for a designer, perhaps a professional designer more than a high school design student, is kind of seeing behind what people are saying, because people don't always have a comprehensive idea of what's possible in a design. They might be kind of very familiar and habituated to their own ways of doing things and in terms of what's possible, but also they might be blind to some of the problems that are easy for you to see as an outsider. Yeah, I always want to not take exactly what the user tells you. It seems like a dangerous thing to say. You want to listen to users, but you don't want to it's a balancing act. You don't want them to dictate everything. And when there's more users, you get that diversity of opinion that makes that a little bit easier to see that that's necessary. Yeah. So how are we going for time? Probably need to move on to the Q&A. Do you think, Mike?
Yeah, there is one question that relates to exams. This one's from Stephen. And please, if anyone has any further questions, it's around that time, so it'd be great to hear them. This one's is how could you please go into the next year's assessment? So this focusing particularly on the design challenge, the 20%. I thought the first assessment was the exam. Yes, it is. How do we incorporate a stakeholder?
For the exam,
for the exam, yeah. So I've just I think we've just come past our deadline at school, and I've put a stakeholder. I think her name is Bev, and Bev is someone who's looking for a product in particular. I won't go into too much detail because without the stimulus in front of me to share with you guys, it won't be too useful. But I went product design specifically because I felt that was more relatable to my students, and they've got some familiar understanding in that space. And then I've tried to pack as much information about where Bev comes from and what her needs might be. I've been very cautious and warned off, I think, the idea of trying to pick someone who's got a particular disability. I think that's it's not necessarily a way forward, but I have given Bev a bad back. And I give a little bit of detail about her bad back and about where and how she wants to do something going into the future. And it's about meeting a particular need there for Bev.
Just having a quick look at our chapter notes. So we're talking about the Unit 3.
Unit 3 design challenge. Yeah.
That's right.
The example one that's up is on Rick. Rick's got a bad arm, and Rick's got a bag on his back, and it's got an empathy map in there. So I think the takeaway from me from QCEA was they're looking for us to build some understanding about how that stakeholders feels and in relation to how they're relating and wanting to do whatever it is that in this case Rick wants to do. We are not limited to just doing products. In Rick's case, it is a bag. It is very specific in relation to the product that we want to develop for him. And it's a nice sample for us to use, and I think it's answered a lot of questions from people. I think we make a point of saying we're not QCEA, so we try our best not to give too much exact numbers on this, because there should be one single source, and the single source is QCEA. But I guess it's just our interpretation.
Yeah, it does sound like we're trying to say buy a book, but then don't hold us accountable. Yeah, it's just that, you know, it is absolutely important to read all the QCAA stuff, which is what we've been doing as much as possible.
I might answer the next question if that's all right.
Yeah, go
Andrew,
for it.
I think I really like this one because I've had a lot of this in my class at the moment. So this is from Michael Powell. Thank you, Michael. Might be slightly off topic, but how do we combat the AI generated representations in student work or even manufactured data, for example, interviews, responses to questionnaires? Is it possible to authenticate as their work? And are you witnessing this in first year and second year university yourself, Andrew? That's interesting because I think you've talked about it with me. I'll give you my take certainly on the first part of it. If I can't see a storyline where students have sketched first and used a sketch to prompt to a tool, and AI is a tool, it's a great tool for rendering, but if you're using it to come up with the concept and the ideas, and I see no evidence prior to that, it's difficult for me to reward it. But if I'm shown by a student that this was the sketch I used, this was my source, here was my prompt, and I simply asked the AI to create a rendered version of that, I think that's like using any other digital tool. It's just an incredibly quick and powerful one. Whereas perhaps when we were bound by things like Photoshop, we were bound by students' understanding of how to use Photoshop or Illustrator or however they were creating a digital or Fusion, and I could go on and give you a big list of CADs. But now we've got something that will generate a response if we provide it. But if I'm not providing any of my own sketch work in particular, I think it's really important that there's an evidence of here was my original sketch and I would like, and can you do X, Y, and Z for me? I think that's really important to go forward with. If we're seeing no supportive evidence and no storyline of an idea, and then suddenly it gets dropped in, particularly in text, I'm seeing an awful lot of students dropping 4 ideas, but they're giving me it in bullet points, and the Z's are in there because it's Americanized English and all those other things that the tells for an AI source. I find that difficult to start looking at that as innovative. I'm starting to struggle to connect that word innovative, and innovative's in the ISMG, and I'm pretty hard on that one. And as hard as it is to go through and start trying to say, oh, well, I can't mark that, I can mark that, I'm simply marking the evidence to suggest it was the student's work, and it has innovation in there. Andrew, have you seen it in first and second year students?
Well, I should acknowledge that I'm not teaching at university now. I've retired. I still have an adjunct relationship with QT, but the topic of AI used in the design process is something discussed a lot with my colleagues, and I think one of the things we try to do at uni is kind of acknowledge it and not say it doesn't exist or you can't use it, but let's look at how to use it the right way. It reminds me, the sort of AI thing reminds me of something I saw with the rise of computer-aided design, showing my age, where students used to produce these highly glossy renderings of their products. We're doing industrial design, and you have these highly rendered, beautiful, polished renderings of undercooked designs. So they jumped into CAD very prematurely. They didn't have a thought out design, but CAD would give them a beautiful render of a crappy product. And I think AI has the same kind of things. If you let it control you, if you just say, give me this, and you take what it gives you, you're lost. You're not designing. It's just because the AI stuff is fairly random. It's basically it's just churning and generating stuff. It doesn't have any thinking or intent behind it in any kind of depth. And I think if you want to use it and use it well, it can be a really interesting way of provoking your thinking. But if it's the end of your process, it's no good. So what we at uni, a big part of what we do is we want to look at the whole process that the students followed. So we're never assessing the final thing that they submit. We're always assessing how they produced it. So there's always the sketchbook, and from the crudest, earliest research and ideas all the way through how the ideas develop and get richer and better, and the different paths it takes, the exploration, leading up to the final proposal. And for us, you can't really assess just the product of the process. You have to look at the process as well. The thing that sort of solidified this approach in our marking going way back was cheating, good old-fashioned contract cheating and plagiarism, where students would get someone else to do the design for them and just do it and just hand it in as their own work. We had some cases of people doing that, and the giveaway was always that you could go to a contract cheating website and get someone to do your design project for you. Very unusual and very rare, because it was very costly. And those people were really only interested in giving you the design, giving you a design that loosely addressed the brief, but they weren't interested in doing the 30, 40, 50 pages of sketches that require you to do that as part of a well-reasoned design. And so there was no process there. There was only a glossy result. And so that was always a red flag for us. And we have rules at university where if we suspect someone of that, we can require them to justify their learning, to demonstrate it, and basically by putting them on the spot and getting them to do a little exam type thing. I know
Andrew,
that's not going to happen in the high school setting, but yeah, I got no problem with the AI. It's just part of the process. It's not the start and the end of the process. You've got to
Andrew,
actually...
we've got a
Sorry.
question from James. It's not quite on the word cheating, but I like it because there's a couple of terms in the ISMG that get used. I think we've addressed them in book one. One of them is unique, and then the other word's innovative, and it's trying to unpack those two terms that sometimes restrict students from getting through. I think we reference the website Everything is a Remix, And really the idea being that there's an awful lot of ideas and concepts already out there, and it's very, very difficult to find something that is unique. So how do you break down that term unique?
Oh, that's a really that's something I struggled with from the earliest days of teaching, was that um, when you get experienced design teachers, in my context, it was me and my tutors. We'd run similar design projects, a couple of times. Good project, really interesting things. We'd repeat it to another cohort and maybe another one. And after a while, you get to see the most common results, the most common ideas resurface. And for the people who are marking the work, you say, I've seen that. That's not original. That's not unique. But for the first year student doing it for the first time, it's unique to them. It's novel. It's innovative to them because they don't have a comprehensive view of the field. They don't know all this stuff. So I think it's really important when we think about what's unique or what's innovative, we really have set our expectations very realistically for a student who's new to design, not an expert, doesn't have comprehensive sort of global image, a comprehensive view of the global sort of movement in this field. And so I think it's very harsh to expect something which is technically unique or technically innovative. I think it's about process, their thinking, encouraging them to have researching and find out what the state of the art is and making their own responses to that, and not being wary of our expert God's eye view of design and saying that's not unique, I've seen that before. So I think we have to set our expectations to be reasonable when we're asking for those things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I often see a lot of work where I say, well, you know what, the design necessarily is not 100% unseen. However, the way that you've applied it, the way that you've connected it to this particular scenario is unique. It's not been looked at that way before. So it's sometimes it's the application of a way of thinking or a particular solution. And their adaptation of it, that certainly ticks that unique and innovative box, and sometimes trying to attach a different aspects. I think in Unit 4 in the book coming up, there is a chapter on identifying sustainable design opportunities, an area that my students is chapter 10 have often really struggled with, and there's a few processes and methods about leaning on whether it be new technologies or how to incorporate a gap in the market, and how we might guide students in that space. I think it's of all the exploring spaces of units 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 certainly offers a massive challenge for students to try and see that they have to tick all the boxes. And I guess my takeaway is that you don't have to tick every one. It doesn't have to be a gap in the market that's a perfect gap in the market. It doesn't have to be this idea of it must be something unique and completely innovative, and that we can lean on bits of those, simply providing a more sustainable option than one that exists. It really does already tick that innovative box. But I really like that question from James, because it's one that I've heard before, and I really appreciate it. There's no more questions at the moment.
I'm just having a look at the Mentimeter survey. Empathy was one of the big keywords that came through, and I'm just having a look. Empathy, digital sketching, prototyping, annotations, syllabus 1.1, emotional durability. These are some of the words that people suggested they'd like to hear about. We talked a little bit about empathy. Would you like to talk about that some more? Do you have any thoughts on empathy, Mike?
My wife would tell you I haven't got any, but I find this journey with the students and trying to tap into feelings easier when you're speaking to different genders. And it sounds that probably sounds wrong. I find the girls are generally more in touch with being able to talk about empathy in a more mature way, and some of the boys really struggle, and it's the maturity side of things that does that. But that comes into that studio design approach, and trying to drive that maturity into every lesson, and trying to bring them back to the purpose of why they're there. And I think it's really important. I think it's really important to put examples in front of them of how successful some designs can be when people have listened to how others feel. Even if you go back to I think there's an example that everyone will relate to, is the stadium exam, which was part of the first syllabus, and how it really the stimulus itself talks about how people would feel going into a stadium. My bag's getting looked at, I'm getting looked at. It feels a little bit of an invasive process, and talking them through those kinds of experiences before leading them into how they can resolve those. I thought that was a great example of how to lead students through an empathy process for purpose, trying to find ways and things around it.
There's a couple of questions on prototyping have just popped up. So, and that's probably worth talking about. Do you have any thoughts on, so Carol suggested one, and Caroline's also highlighted Thorsten's question in the chat about prototyping.
I think it touches on that AI conversation again, because we're seeing very, very quick digital prototypes, and there is that argument that a digital prototype meets the need. And I come back to that, I don't necessarily actively encourage it, but I very much expect if you're going to use the tool, that's fine, but it has to be supported with very, very clear prompting. We're seeing a lot of students happily. Well, I'm seeing a lot of students happily using digital prototypes really quickly. So whether it's an app, and then looking at some of those card testing activities that we've got in the second books as a great starting point, where they can kind of put a process in place where they really get some testing from it, whether it's running a video in front of people and collecting more information just through an interview type survey. It is always that time poor issue where students, if they haven't got the time, it's the physical prototype that gets put last, and that's quite sad depending on the outcome you're looking for, particularly if you're looking at a fashion design solution. Seeing an item of clothing worn by someone is it tells us a lot about what might be refined or what might be different in relation to how it flows and how it connects with that person. So I guess I'm throwing up more problems than anything else, but it's just a very, very important part of our processing.
I suppose also I think it's important that people don't think of a prototype as a very polished functional thing necessarily. It's just, we talk about lo-fi prototype. What we mean is, getting that stuff done as part of the design process really early on, not at the end of the process. So it's not a presentation tool. Here's my finished design. I'm wearing it, or I'm using it, or whatever. It's a rough might be made from someone talks about Roblox or Lego or Minecraft or something like that. It's a very rough and ready, quick way of getting testing your idea early, so that you can abandon the bad stuff and focus on the good stuff. So yeah, and that suggests that those kind of lo-fi prototyping techniques, you should prioritize the things which take a low investment of time and pay dividends in feedback. The basic human nature is, if you invest many hours in making a prototype or a design drawing, any problems with it, you're more likely to put a band-aid solution over the problem than say, oh, that's not going to work, I need to start, go back a few paces and redo it. So anything that gets you too emotionally invested in a design prematurely is going to bite you on the bum, so to speak. So you don't want to do that too early, if that makes sense. So I guess what I'm trying to say is quick and dirty prototyping is a really good thing to do by whatever means. It might be glue and paddle pop sticks. It might be bits of cardboard and hot glue to make a scale model of the building you're designing really early on, and or using Lego to think about the spaces. Anything that lets you not be locked into the design, but take it apart and change it in response to what you learn is much better than something where you spend 20 hours making it and then someone says, oh, well, that's no good. And you say, well, it's too late. I'm not going to change it. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah. Some old fabric and a stapler, some foam boards and a cutting mat. There's some requests on prototyping. There is a question about digital prototyping and in relation to, is that still considered as a lo-fi prototype? My understanding is that a digital prototype still meets the needs. Roblox, I'm not so sure on, but I guess, whatever format it comes in, as long as it's trying to express what the students are putting up and it's not leaning on pre-generated framework of some sort, it has to be relating to the concept that they're putting forward, and perhaps the one that they've used their folio to support the storytelling of that. If it suddenly goes to a digital prototype that looks very, very different and significant changes, then it's probably a cause for concern.
Some great comments coming through. Thank you. How are we going for time?
I think we might be out. I think, and well done for everyone staying on, because I think we might be out of time. And I think that we've got a process for how we're going to collect data for the next one, so that we're talking about Unit 4 things that people want to hear about, so that in 2 weeks' time we're kind of not going just our own pilot way. We're trying to listen and direct it to what people would like to hear about.
Oh, that was strange. My
Thanks very
slides
much,
just
guys.
disappeared.
Oh, it looks like, we're out of time, but it's a wonderful session. It was really interesting to see all the questions coming through and everything. So hopefully that warms everyone up for a couple of weeks' time when Andrew and Mike will be back to do a Unit 4. So Unit 3, they did a session in data, which some of you may have attended, and so didn't have a chance to talk about Unit 4. So the next session hopefully will be as fantastic as this one, but also encourage you, I guess, to get the questions in early, so as we're sort of working through, because the time is limited. But it's so great to see this kind of communication coming through, and I think you can see Mike and Andrew's passion for the subject, and hopefully that really comes through in the textbooks that they've worked so hard on too. So just wanted to make that comment, and thank you both for the passion and energy that you've given to this, and the care that you take to all the decisions and all the discussions and all those summer days working on it and nights that you've been working on it. It's much appreciated. So Jess, did you want to flash anything else up about contacting David and Amanda at all before we go?
Yep. So did we just want to quickly, I don't know if we want to put the slide up.
That's okay. I think everyone's probably wanting to go, but by all means, you saw the email, and if you've got any questions about, want to see some sample material or anything when you're making decisions for next year, that's all available.
Okay, I've just also put that email in there again if anyone wants to reach out, any questions, so that's there. Okay.
I put the link to the Unit 4 webinar Mentimeter survey, so if you want to get put some things on the agenda early, you can do that if you're planning to attend that.
I might just jump in really quick. If you have bought a class set of Unit 1 and 2, which is currently available right now, and you don't already have your access to Nelson Mindtap, all those great examples of the resources that Mike and Andrew were showing earlier on in the presentation. Those are available on Nelson MindTap as your teacher resources. So if your school has bought a class set and you don't have access to that yet, please reach out because you're entitled to complimentary access. But again, that's based on a class set adoption. One single book won't do it. And if you haven't got your access yet, you're really missing out on quite a lot of good stuff. So please reach out. We can help you with that.
Well said. Thanks, David. I think that might
Thanks,
be
David.
it for everyone, and we'll hopefully see you all in a couple of weeks. Thanks,
Yeah,
Mike and
thanks for
Andrew.
coming. Thanks for
Thanks, guys.
hosting.
Thank you.